The first encounter, a shadow in the snow. The sentry and the shadow. The winter of 1944 wrapped the Ardennes in a silence so profound it seemed unnatural. Snow fell in thick sheets, layering the pine branches with icy weight and muffling every sound except the wind's soft whisper. Private James Miller, a 19-year-old American paratrooper with the 101st Airborne, stood alone on sentry duty at the edge of a remote clearing outside Bastogne. The air was bitter and still. His breath rose in ghostly clouds as he clutched his rifle tighter, his gloved fingers numb and trembling. The usual distant boom of artillery and occasional staccato of rifle fire had faded hours ago. What replaced it was far worse: stillness. Total, suffocating stillness. Miller had heard stories, whispers from other soldiers about strange things in these woods. Things that didn't make sense. But he chalked it up to nerves and cold, until he saw it. At first, he thought it was a shadow. Just beyond the tree line across the clearing, a dark shape stood between the trees. Massive, silent, unmoving. As his eyes adjusted to the low light of the moon reflecting off the snow, the shape sharpened. It was a dog, or something like it, its fur black as coal, so dark it seemed to absorb the moonlight. And its eyes glowed yellow like twin embers burning in the night. The creature didn't growl or snarl. It didn't move. It just stared at him, not like an animal looking at prey, but like something ancient, something aware, something judging. A chill ran down Miller's spine that had nothing to do with the cold. His training screamed at him to shout a challenge, to raise his weapon. So he did. "Who's there?" he called out into the silence, his voice echoing back to him strangely, swallowed by the trees. The creature didn't answer. It took one deliberate step forward. The snow crunched beneath its weight. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Miller raised his rifle and fired a warning shot into the air. The sharp crack split the silence like a knife. The dog didn't flinch. He blinked, and just like that, it was gone. No sound, no footprints. No shadow slinking away. Just the forest again, silent, still. By the time his fellow soldiers arrived in response to the shot, Miller's hands were shaking. His words were frantic, hard to understand. It was huge, black as night, eyes like fire, and then it vanished. They dismissed it as nerves or fatigue. But the next morning, their sector was hit with one of the fiercest bombardments of the siege. Many soldiers were killed. Miller survived, but he never forgot the eyes, nor did he ever doubt what he saw. It was not an animal. It was a warning, and he wasn't the only one who would see it. The field medics encounter death at the door. The dog that waits. Private First Class Daniel Jacobs was no stranger to death. As a medic with the 101st Airborne, he had seen more blood and pain than most frontline riflemen. Still, nothing had prepared him for the bitter weeks in Bastogne, where the wounded never stopped coming and the howling wind seemed to mourn louder than the dying men. It was a little after midnight, and the aid tent was quiet for once. The wounded inside were stable, their groans silenced by morphine and fatigue. Jacob sat near the front flap of the tent, warming his hands over a small, flickering stove. Outside, snow fell in heavy silence, blanketing the ground in a deceptive calm. For the first time in days, he allowed himself a moment of stillness. Then came the chill, not the kind born of wind or cold, but a sensation that crawled up his spine like invisible fingers. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end, a feeling of being watched, intensely, deliberately. He turned. There, standing just outside the tent's entrance, barely within the halo of the stove's glow, was a black dog. It was enormous. Its body seemed carved from shadow, its eyes glowing faintly gold, reflecting the firelight like twin coals. It made no sound, no movement, just stood there, staring at him. Jacobs froze, his breath caught in his throat. His mind raced to explain it. A stray, a hallucination, fatigue. But none of those things had eyes that looked into you. Through you, he whispered, though he didn't know why. The dog didn't react. Gathering his courage, he stood slowly, his boots creaking on the wooden boards. The dog tilted its head slightly, as if acknowledging him, then turned and walked away into the night. Jacobs rushed to the tent flap and looked out. Nothing. No prints in the snow. No shadow moving in the moonlight, as if it had never been there. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. At dawn, two of the wounded men who had seemed stable the night before were dead. Peacefully, quietly, with no warning. Jacobs reported their deaths and did his duty. But the image of the black dog lingered. A silent observer. A sentinel of death. Later, while preparing new bandages, Jacobs mentioned the dog to another medic. The man's eyes narrowed. "You saw it too," he said. Jacobs nodded. "I've seen it twice," the man whispered. "It always shows up near a dying man. Never makes a sound. Just watches." In the following days, Jacobs heard more stories. The black dog appearing at the edge of the aid tents, lurking near foxholes, staring from the woods. It never harmed anyone. It never approached. But when it appeared, someone always died soon after. They began to call it the dog that waits. Not a monster, not a ghost, but something else entirely. A guardian, a reaper, a reminder that in war, death often comes silently, and sometimes it watches you first. Into the fog, the lost patrol of Bastogne, where the fog swallowed men. The order was simple: recon the eastern tree line, confirm no German movement, and return before sunrise. Sergeant William Carter had led dozens of these patrols, but something about this one felt off. 6 men from the 101st Airborne slipped quietly into the woods just as the last light of dusk vanished behind the snow-capped ridges. The forest welcomed them like a grave, silent, cold, and endless. Carter noted the strange stillness in his field journal before departure. Quiet day, strange tension in the air. Heading out with the boys to check the tree line. Something feels wrong. For the first hour, all was normal. The men moved in practice formation, their boots crunching softly through snow, eyes sharp for any sign of German activity. Then the fog rolled in, thick, sudden, and unnatural. It curled around trees and swallowed sound. Within minutes, visibility dropped to mere feet. Even Carter, always composed, gritted his teeth. "We hold formation. Eyes on each other," he whispered. Then Private Charlie Dunn saw it. "Sarge," he said, barely a breath, pointing ahead. At first, Carter saw nothing. Just fog. Then, emerging from the white like a shadow made solid, came a massive black dog. It stood directly in their path. Still, watching. Its body blended into the mist, but its eyes, those damned glowing eyes, cut through the darkness like lanterns. The men froze. No one spoke. No one breathed. The dog didn't move. It just stared, as though it was weighing them, judging them. Carter raised his rifle. Something deep inside told him not to fire. Instead, he took a cautious step forward. "Go on," he called gently. "Get out of here." The dog tilted its head, curious, then turned and vanished into the fog. Gone, just like that. They continued, nerves frayed. The silence of the forest now carried a weight none of them could name. Whispers swirled in the mist. Branches cracked with no wind. Shadows moved without cause. Hours passed, then more, and Carter realized the forest had betrayed them. They were lost. No matter how many times he checked his compass or map, nothing lined up. Every tree looked the same. Every direction led to nowhere. The fog refused to lift. "I saw it again," Dunn whispered at one point. "Back there in the trees. Just for a second." By morning, no patrol returned. Search teams were dispatched, but found nothing. No footprints. No broken branches. No gear. Just a field journal, lying in the snow beside a tree marked with 3 deep, claw-like scratches. The final entry read, "Saw it again. Watching us. Don't think we're alone out here." The patrol was never found. Some said the Germans ambushed them and buried the bodies. Others believed the men simply froze, lost in the wilderness. But among those who heard the story, those who had also seen the glowing eyes, there was another theory. The fog hadn't just hidden the dog. The dog had been leading them, and something else had taken them. Steel and Shadows, the dog among the panzers. Title, marked by midnight eyes. On the other side of the forest, where the snow blanketed German steel in deceptive quiet, the infamous Panzer Lehr Division prepared for their next push toward Bastogne. Their column of Tiger tanks stood like sleeping giants among the trees, snouts pointed toward the enemy lines, crews busy with last-minute repairs under the flickering light of gas lamps. Private Hans Becker, a grizzled veteran of the Eastern Front, had seen the worst of war. He had long since buried his fear beneath layers of discipline and ice. But that night, something buried clawed its way back to the surface. It started as a feeling, subtle, then suffocating. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums. He was tightening a coupling on his tank when he saw it. A flicker of movement just beyond the light. Something large, something black. He straightened, rubbed his eyes, and it stepped into view. A dog, but not just any dog. It was massive, shoulder-high and solid as a bear. Its fur was so dark it absorbed the light. And its eyes, they weren't the eyes of an animal. They glowed yellow, deep as furnaces, ancient as bone. Was ist das, he muttert. The dog moved silently, weaving between the tanks, its head low, its pace deliberate. It passed each machine like a ghost inspecting the weapons of men. Becker called out, low and firm, Klaus. Siehst du das? Klaus, a brash young officer, turned with a sneer. It's a stray. He raised his rifle. No, Becker hissed. Too late. The rifle cracked. The shot rang through the forest. And the dog didn't even flinch. It turned its head slowly, mechanically, toward Klaus. Locked eyes with him. The camp fell still. The men, all hardened warriors, stood paralyzed. Then the dog turned and vanished into the trees. No howl, no flash of movement. Just gone. Becker's breath steamed in the air. That wasn't a dog. The veterans nodded grimly. They had seen things in the east. They knew what signs to heed. But Klaus just laughed and called them cowards. The next day, they rolled forward toward Bastogne. By sunset, their column was in ruins. American forces, bolstered by reinforcements, launched a vicious counterattack. The once mighty line of Tiger tanks became little more than burning husks scattered across the frozen forest. Among the dead, Klaus. His body was found near a shattered turret, his face frozen in an expression of horror. Becker survived, but barely. Later, when he recounted the moment to a fellow survivor, his voice trembled. It walked between the tanks, he whispered, like it was choosing. Marking. Klaus shot at it, and the next day he was gone. They called it a harbinger, an omen. And from that night on, Becker never again ignored the silence before the storm. He would listen, watch the tree lean, and pray that he never saw those eyes again.
Death's Crest, the ghost on the ridge. The dog on Death's Crest. The ridge north of Bastogne had earned many names and whispers. Devil's Tooth, Frozen Watch. But after what happened to Corporal Thomas Grayson and his unit, it would be known forever as Death's Crest. It was the kind of night that felt like time had stopped. The snow gleamed silver under the moonlight, covering the world in a ghostly glow. Grayson, a forward observer with the 101st Airborne, sat with two other soldiers in a shallow foxhole, scanning the white ridgeline through fog binoculars. Their breath curled into the air like smoke from dying fires. Hours passed. Nothing. No shelling. No movement. Not even wind. Then, just past midnight, Grayson saw something that made him stop breathing. Contact! Ridge, he whispered, tugging the arm of the soldier beside him. The man raised his own binoculars. What the hell is that? There on the crest stood a silhouette. Massive. Still. Grayson adjusted the lens, squinting into the shimmering dark. It was a dog. A monstrous one. Towering, jet black, and deathly still. Its fur shimmered like tar under moonlight, but it was the eyes that froze him. Glowing gold, unblinking, locked directly onto their position. Should I shoot? The third soldier asked, his voice cracking. No, Grayson didn't know why he said it, but it was like something inside him screamed not to. The dog didn't growl, didn't move, just stared like a statue carved from war. It stood there for what felt like hours. Then, slowly, it turned away, vanishing into the woods behind the ridge as if melting into the trees. The three men were left speechless, shaking. That night, they barely slept, each haunted by the golden eyes in the dark. The next morning, at first light, hell came. A German artillery barrage slammed into the position like God's hammer. Earth exploded, trees splintered. The ridge, calm only hours before, became a storm of death. Men screamed, dirt rained, lives were erased in seconds. Grayson survived, but barely. Bloodied and dazed, he crawled through smoking craters to regroup with the remnants of his squad. He couldn't stop thinking about the dog, how it had stood on that ridge like a sentinel or a reaper. When he told his story to a medic, the man just nodded. "You saw it too," he whispered. "The dog. Death walks with it." Others came forward. A machine gunner, a sniper, each with the same tail. A black dog on the ridge. Massive, silent, watching. Some said it was guarding something. Others believed it was choosing who would live or die. A few thought it was war itself, given shape by grief and blood. The name stuck, Death's Crest. And the dog? It was now legend. Soldiers no longer joked when the night grew quiet. They watched the tree leans, not for Germans, but for eyes in the dark. Because if you saw the black dog, something was coming, and it would not leave without a price. Lost in the fog, Carter's patrol disappears. The vanishing patrol. It was supposed to be a routine patrol. 6 men from the 101st Airborne were sent beyond Bastogne's defensive perimeter just before dusk. The woods had been quiet for days, too quiet. Their orders were simple. Check the tree line, look for German movement, and report back by sunrise. Sergeant William Carter led the squad. He was a steady hand, respected and level-headed, a veteran of Corentin, a survivor of Normandy. He'd seen his share of death, but even he couldn't explain the strange weight in the air that evening. Before they left, he scribbled a short note in his journal. Quiet day, strange tension in the air. Heading out with the boys. Something feels off. The patrol moved silently through the snow-draped forest. Their boots crunched on the frost, muffled by thick fog that crept in like a ghostly tide. The sun vanished quickly, replaced by a shroud of gray that turned black within the hour. It was Private Charlie Dunn who first saw it. "Sarge," he whispered, pointing. "There. Look." Carter squinted into the fog. A dark figure was emerging, low to the ground but massive. It walked without sound, its outline barely discernible against the trees. A dog, or something like one. Its eyes glowed faintly, cutting through the fog like embers. Yellow, intelligent, watching. The men froze. "What do we do?" Dunn asked, his voice shaking. "Hold," Carter replied. He stepped forward slowly, lifting one gloved hand in a calming gesture. "Shoo, get out of here." The dog tilted its head, as if amused, then turned and disappeared into the mist. Silence returned, but it felt worse now. Heavier. The patrol pushed on, but the forest had changed. The fog thickened. The trees grew strange, twisted and indistinct, like the landscape itself was shifting. Their compasses spun. Maps no longer matched the terrain. The men circled endlessly, growing more frantic with each passing hour. Whispers crept in. Twigs snapped behind them. Shadows moved just out of sight. "Carter," one man said, "we're not alone." Dunn swore he saw the dog again, twice, but each time it was gone before he could point it out. By morning, they were missing. Search parties combed the area. Nothing. No tracks. No gear. No signs of struggle. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole. Days later, a recovery team found Carter's field journal lying in the snow beneath a tree scored with deep claw marks. The final entry read, "Saw it again. Watching us. Don't think we're alone out here." The story spread like wildfire through the ranks. The black dog wasn't just a ghost. It was a hunter. Some said it led Carter's patrol to their doom. Others believed it warned them, and they failed to listen. But all agreed, The Ardennes had claimed them, and whatever lived in those woods was still watching. Lost in the fog, Carter's patrol disappears. The vanishing patrol. It was supposed to be a routine patrol. 6 men from the 101st Airborne were sent beyond Bastogne's defensive perimeter just before dusk. The woods had been quiet for days, too quiet. Their orders were simple. Check the tree line, look for German movement, and report back by sunrise. Sergeant William Carter led the squad. He was a steady hand, respected and level-headed, a veteran of Corentin, a survivor of Normandy. He'd seen his share of death, but even he couldn't explain the strange weight in the air that evening. Before they left, he scribbled a short note in his journal. Quiet day, strange tension in the air. Heading out with the boys. Something feels off. The patrol moved silently through the snow-draped forest. Their boots crunched on the frost, muffled by thick fog that crept in like a ghostly tide. The sun vanished quickly, replaced by a shroud of gray that turned black within the hour. It was Private Charlie Dunn who first saw it. "Sarge," he whispered, pointing. "There. Look." Carter squinted into the fog. A dark figure was emerging, low to the ground but massive. It walked without sound, its outline barely discernible against the trees. A dog, or something like one. Its eyes glowed faintly, cutting through the fog like embers. Yellow, intelligent, watching. The men froze. "What do we do?" Dunn asked, his voice shaking. "Hold," Carter replied. He stepped forward slowly, lifting one gloved hand in a calming gesture. "Chew, get out of here." The dog tilted its head, as if amused, then turned and disappeared into the mist. Silence returned, but it felt worse now. Heavier. The patrol pushed on, but the forest had changed. The fog thickened. The trees grew strange, twisted and indistinct, like the landscape itself was shifting. Their compasses spun. Maps no longer matched the terrain. The men circled endlessly, growing more frantic with each passing hour. Whispers crept in. Twigs snapped behind them. Shadows moved just out of sight. "Carter," one man said, "we're not alone." Dunn swore he saw the dog again, twice, but each time it was gone before he could point it out. By morning, they were missing. Search parties combed the area. Nothing. No tracks. No gear. No signs of struggle. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole. Days later, a recovery team found Carter's field journal lying in the snow beneath a tree scored with deep claw marks. The final entry read, "Saw it again. Watching us. Don't think we're alone out here." The story spread like wildfire through the ranks. The black dog wasn't just a ghost. It was a hunter. Some said it led Carter's patrol to their doom. Others believed it warned them, and they failed to listen. But all agreed, the Ardennes had claimed them, and whatever lived in those woods was still watching. Segment 8, Death's Crest. The ridge that looked back. To the north of Bastogne, a ridge stood like a sentinel, quiet, cold, and cruel. It was high ground, strategic. Whoever held it could see everything below. But the soldiers of the 101st Airborne had another name for it, Death's Crest. Corporal Thomas Grayson had been stationed at a forward observation post along the ridge. His orders were simple: spot German movement and report it. But what he saw that night wasn't something he could report over radio. It was just after midnight. The sky was clear, stars glittering above like silent witnesses. Snow blanketed everything, reflecting the moonlight like a frozen sea. Grayson and 2 others took turns peering through binoculars, eyes stinging from the wind. Then came the shadow. At first, Grayson thought his eyes were playing tricks on him, a dark shape near the top of the ridge. It stood motionless, black against white, sharp as ink spilled on paper. He adjusted the focus. His breath caught. It was a dog. No, it looked like a dog. Massive. Still. Watching. Its eyes glowed like molten amber. "Do you see that?" he whispered, nudging the man beside him. One glanced through the binoculars, and the soldier cursed low under his breath. "What the hell is that?" The third man refused to even look. "I'm not putting that thing in my scope," he muttered, voice trembling. "I don't want it looking back." The dog didn't move. It didn't need to. Its presence filled the space like smoke, heavy, choking. Grayson felt a strange sensation wash over him. Fear, yes, but deeper than that, a sense of being known. He thought about taking the shot. His rifle was right there, but something in his gut told him not to. He just watched, frozen. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Finally, the dog turned and disappeared behind a ridge. Gone. The next morning, the ridge exploded in fire. German artillery rained down like thunder from the heavens. Trees shattered. Earth split. The forward position was annihilated. Grayson and the others barely made it back to the main line, covered in blood, snow, and disbelief. The survivors whispered about what they'd seen. A machine gunner said he saw the dog pacing along the ridge 2 nights before. A sniper swore he had it in his sights, but couldn't pull the trigger. Something had stopped him. Same eyes, same size, same stillness. The stories all matched. That night, the ridge had become a battlefield. The next morning, it became a graveyard. And the dog? It was never seen up there again. But no one forgot it. They renamed the ridge after that night. Not Hill 317, not Outpost Charlie. Just this, Death's Crest. Not because of the Germans, but because something else had claimed it first, and still watched from shadows. The Grave Watcher, where the crosses stand. The battle had quieted, but the dead had not been forgotten. Private Joseph Joe Keller was part of a recovery patrol sent to mark the fallen, bury the unclaimed, and clear what remained of the shattered front line near Bastogne. The fighting had left the area littered with shell craters, frozen limbs, and torn remnants of lives once lived. It was solemn work, the kind that forced men to hold their breath against the smell and memories alike. As dusk fell over a snow-covered clearing, Keller and his team approached a row of makeshift graves. Simple wooden crosses, dog tags nailed into splintered wood, barely held upright in the frozen soil. It was a place of silence, but not peace. That's when he felt it. A stillness, not of nature, but something deeper. A tension that pulled at his bones. Keller looked up. There, at the edge of the clearing, near the tree lean, stood the dog. It was as if it had always been there, blending with the shadows and the evening fog. The creature didn't move. It didn't need to. Its glowing yellow eyes fixed on Keller, unblinking, unreadable. As before, there was no growl, no bark, just presence. One of Keller's comrades dropped his shovel. Jesus, he muttered, hand tightening on his rifle. What the hell is that? Another soldier raised his weapon, but Keller stopped him with a hand. Wait. The dog stepped forward slowly, not toward them, but into the graveyard. And then it began to walk. It passed by each cross, pausing at every one, its head lowering just slightly, as though acknowledging the soul beneath the snow. No paw prints marked its passage. No sound escaped its steps. It moved like a memory, soft, sorrowful, sacred. The patrol stood frozen, caught between fear and reverence. Then stopped, right in front of Keller. For a moment, the world fell away. No wind, no sound, just those burning eyes. It wasn't threatening, but it wasn't kind either. It knew. Keller felt like it was looking through him, not at him, seeing everything. The fear, the doubt, the pain he tried to bury each time he dug another grave. And then the dog turned. It walked slowly toward the trees, its black form fading into the growing dusk. Just before it vanished into the forest, it turned once more, a final glance over its shoulder. And then it was gone. The silence rushed back in. Back at camp, Keller told the others. He expected disbelief, maybe laughter. Instead, he was met with nods. Others had seen it too, by the field hospital, near the burned-out tanks. Watching, waiting. A medic once called it a mourner. A chaplain said it was a shepherd. But Keller called it something else. The Grave Watcher. Because that night, for reasons he'd never understand, the Black Dog had walked among the dead, not to claim them, but to remember them. The final farewell. When the dog looked back, the siege was over. Relief forces had broken through, and the 101st Airborne, battered, frostbitten, and bone-tired, prepared to move on. Bastogne had become more than a battlefield. It had become a graveyard, a memory etched into every surviving soldier's soul. The snow was beginning to melt in patches, but the chill of what had happened there lingered, not just in the air, but in their hearts. Private Keller sat alone near the edge of camp, his rifle resting across his knees. Around him, the unit was packing, dismantling shelters, burning sensitive documents. There was no cheering, no celebration, just the dull rhythm of departure. He hadn't seen the dog again since the night in the graveyard. Part of him hoped that was the end. Another part wasn't so sure. Then, a ripple passed through the camp. Voices dropped to whispers. Heads turned toward the tree line. Keller stood, following the gaze of the others. And there it was, the black dog. Its frame was silhouetted by the pale moonlight, its yellow eyes glowing like embers behind the mist. This time, it didn't come alone. Dozens of soldiers, officers, medics, grunts, emerged from tents and makeshift bunks, drawn by something they didn't understand but couldn't ignore. Even Lieutenant Colonel Myers stepped forward, his jaw tight, his usual mask of discipline cracked by quiet awe. The dog stepped into the open, walking along the perimeter of the camp. Silently, solemnly, it paused at the graves just beyond the firelight, lowered its massive head, and held still. Some men crossed themselves. Others clenched their teeth. A few let their rifles fall gently to the snow. No one spoke. Then the dog turned to the soldiers. It walked past them, not hurried, not menacing, but with a calm, deliberate grace. Its eyes met theirs one by one. Some said they felt nothing. Others said they felt seen. Keller stood motionless as it passed before him. It stopped. For just a second, their eyes locked again, and Keller's breath caught in his throat. He didn't feel fear, not this time. What he felt was understanding, shared weight, recognition. And then, the dog walked to the tree line. It reached the edge of the forest, paused, turned its head, and looked back, not like a ghost, not like a predator, but like something ancient, something sacred, something that had been here long before the war and would remain long after. A final farewell, and then it vanished into the woods. The soldiers stood there long after it was gone. No one tried to explain it. They simply watched the trees and listened to the wind. That night, Keller wrote in his journal, "I don't know what the dog was, but I know what it meant. It carried what we couldn't. And when it looked back, I felt it leaves something behind. Not just a warning, not just a memory, but a part of itself." And with that, the Black Dog of Bastogne became more than a legend. It became a guardian of remembrance, a silent shadow walking between the worlds, watching, mourning, and then moving on.